My presentation is on whatever it takes to Coronobonds, Europe between the crisis. This paper is essentially divided into many subsections. I do not want to go into details about the different subsections of the paper, but largely it is trying to focus on a very important issue which has happened in Europe in the context of the European sovereign debt crisis. And as all of you would know, the sovereign debt crisis which occurred was as a follow up of the global financial crisis which erupted in 2007. So, when the global financial crisis erupted in 2007, the two-way gross capital flows between countries came to a halt, and this resulted in different European banks facing this question of not being able to renew their loans in the US dollar markets. This results in what one could consider as a very serious occurrence, which occurs that the Euro peripheral governments, a number of them had to save their banks and they ended up in debts that their their rates, the rates which they had to mobilize funds in the markets went for a big upswing. As you can see in this particular chart, I'll just show directly that particular chart. And we can see that in the period from 1998 to 2007, like you can see that these are different countries in Europe. Other than Germany, I have mentioned all the five Euro peripheral countries. These countries were all witness to what one could consider as a convergence of interest rates, which happens with the coming of euro and with the favorable environment. And with that, this is the period of euro optimism, thinking that there will be cross-border capital flows, and there is in fact a convergence of interest rates across countries, across Germany to Spain to Portugal to Italy, Ireland. Everybody is basically paying the same interest rate. And suddenly, there is this collapse in the global economy which occurs, and this results in the funding cost of different economies shooting up. In fact, you can see in the picture that the Greece funding cost basically shoots up to over 20%. This was the particular time when, and remember that right from 2009 onwards, different central banks worldwide has been purchasing assets and injecting liquidity into the system. And ECB started a little bit late, but nonetheless, ECB also did. But this is an extraordinary circumstance that when the interest rates, the ECB would like to be as low as you can see for Germany in this chart, we find that for other countries, it turns out to be extremely high, particularly for conflict crisis ridden countries like Greece, Italy, Spain, etc. We find that the funding cost is far higher. That means the European Central Bank, even when it wants a lower interest rate to be prevalent, it's not able to get that done. It is during this particular time that the then President Mario Draghi goes ahead with this argument that we will do whatever it takes towards seeing to it that the euro is safe, because you're in the same region, but the rates of interest which the governments of particular countries have to pay is extremely high. So the monetary policy mechanism in itself collapses, and that's exactly when it was decided by the ECB that they would go for what is called OMT, or outright monetary transaction, wherein the ECB themselves purchases from the secondary markets the bonds of these governments. That is the bonds of governments like, say, Greece and Italy, Spain, etc., to see to it that the bond prices of those goes up and the interest rate comes down. And when the speech was done by Mario Draghi in 26 July 2012, that in itself, that was in 2012, you can see that this particular period is 2012, that in itself basically reduces the interest rates. In fact, there's a steep fall of the interest rates of all of these countries, or the yields of all of these countries, because when the governments have to spend, in case the funding cost of the government per se becomes higher, you will actually end up entering into a new phase of a debt crisis. That was a predicament which, in fact, Draghi was trying to address. And this turned out to be remarkable, and this turned out to receive the wrath of the German bankers. In fact, you would know that there's this Bundesbank, which was the only bank which essentially tried to put a note of opposition to this decision of Mario Draghi's European Central Bank to go for outright monetary transactions. So, what in fact was the problem? In fact, this is the first ever case where you basically had Bundesbank going to the court. The Bundesbank goes to the court. No, Bundesbank doesn't. Bundestag. Some members of the German parliament goes to the court. The German Federal Constitutional Court says that it is not appropriate for the ECB to buy one government's bonds as against others. It is discriminatory. And then the German court says that the European Court of Justice should make its opinion about it. And then came the very celebrated verdict of the European Court of Justice that, see, what ECB has done was something which is necessary to be done in such circumstances, and they were best to take a decision with respect to what they have done, and therefore there was nothing wrong, and it is good that ECB had taken such a decision. But remember that this was the first important conflict which shows up between, or in fact, time and again, right from the time of the inception of Euro, there has always been this argument that Germany, which has a preoccupation with extremely low levels of prices, low levels of inflation, they would see to it that the larger Euro area, Frankfurt, would actually try to serve the purposes of Germany. This is clear from, say, these charts, which I'm trying to show to you, that I'll show this chart the last. This chart, you can clearly see that these blue bars below are the American current account deficit, these blue bars below. And you can see that Germany, which was in fact characterized as a sick man of Europe, this is this reddish bars, which you can see. I'm trying to put the cursor through that. And these reddish bars clearly shows the German current account surplus. And in fact, the German current account surplus has reached such levels that, on the other hand, we generally have a big complaint about Chinese current account surpluses. See, this is the Chinese current account surplus. Of course, China had a huge current account surplus, but over a period of time, it had dwindled. Of course, again, it is going up. But nonetheless, German current account surplus comes in the context of what is called this Hartz reform, which has been undertaken in Germany, by means of which the wages do not increase in tandem with productivity improvements. So logically speaking, they're able to sell at lower relative unit cost. And remember that the German surpluses during the early stage was also because of the surpluses which they could actually extract from its counterpart countries otherwise. That is, countries within Europe itself, they used to have a surplus. And this actually is now being emulated by the GIPS countries, because remember that you have a currency, euro. There is no scope of a depreciation of the euro in the euro region. The only way by means of which you can actually try to sell cheap to other countries or try to increase your advantage is by bringing your domestic price levels, reducing your own price levels, indeed to sell competitively. And remember that what was done by Germany in this chart, or German, I have shown you the German surplus. In fact, the German surplus chart itself is here. We can see that the current account of Germany has been continually on the increase. This is the blue line which shows the collective current account. And you can see that Germany has continually had a merchandise trade surplus. And over and above that, the German finance capital, through its investments abroad, has been able to get large amount of primary income on this ground. So there is this interest which Germany puts forward with respect to trying to keep prices lower and thus getting competitiveness. Now, what has happened in the context of the crisis in Europe is that because countries are now struck with euro, and with countries struck with euro, there is only one way by means of which they can be flexible. That is, they have to reduce their levels of prices. And the reduction of levels of prices is now resulting in what is called the GIPS countries. They were all in big current account deficits, see, till 2012. And ever since, this green chart is the one of Italy. It has got current account surpluses. Remember, this particular period, 21-22 data, I'm not putting. And again, you have the other countries, Spain, which has also got a current account surplus. So you have a large movement which is happening from a period where all these European economies, peripheral economies, had current account deficits, and they are moving to a world of current account surpluses. And remember that this surplus is coming during a time when the rates of growth are not that good. That means these surpluses are coming by a reduction in the level of imports, as well as they're deflating. That is, their levels of price levels are coming down. They're deflating. They're basically selling at a lower price. So what was being done by Germany in the previous period is now being done by all these European economies, which means that You're having one Europe itself turning out to be a surplus region as against the deficits, which is basically most of the deficits is being done by United States. So here is a very big issue because we generally have this argument which is being put forward by a set of economists that different countries in Asia accumulate reserves. And why do they accumulate reserves? They do not want their currency to appreciate vis-a-vis the dollar. So they want to keep the price levels of their countries at a lower level. That is the argument. But technically, our price levels are at a lower level also because we have plenty amount of labor resource, and therefore, to our price levels are at a lower level, and we are able to sell cheap. What does this chart show? If one could clearly look at this chart, if you take 2010, the price level as 100, we find that this is the price level changes which has happened to countries like at the top, we have Russian Federation. This is India, which has got a number of 186. This is again Brazil, and this is South Africa. I took the BRICS countries other than China. China is over here. China is very well. China's number is this one, 130. So what you find is that all of these BRICS sorts of countries have got extremely high rates of price increases in comparison with the European countries. So which means that even when you have an argument that you are depreciating your currencies and you're able to enhance your competitiveness, now what's going to happen? That is, we have two models. The model of the 1950s to 70s, wherein you say that you create mass markets, you enhance wages, and that wages will add to the mass demand, and that will actually enable your countries to grow. And that was exactly the logic which was being put forward during the golden age of capitalism. But the same Europe is now witness to a different sort of a situation where you're keeping prices low. You're now treading the what was being done by Germany as an exercise is now being done by all economies. All of them, their price levels have increased barely from 100 to 106 or 105 or 107, which means that they are they are garnering some sort of an advantage over even the Asian industrializing possibilities, because now Asian industrializing possibilities, by riding the tide of keeping real exchange rates depreciated, is significantly under challenge. This also brings us to the next part, because again we should remember that the deflationary momentum which has picked up in Europe is going to have significant effects on developmental possibilities in the rest of the world. And this also brings me to the last part of what was the most important event which happened after Mario Draghi's whatever it takes in Europe, which is this question of financing the Coronobonds. And in financing the Coronobonds, also we find that there were two perspectives. The perspective number one is the perspective which was being put forward by the set of countries which were affected by the same Italy, Spain, and six other Eurozone countries, which said that, see, it is for no specific fiscal mistake of the past that Italy, Spain, and others are suffering now. And therefore, too, the financing of the Corona bonds should be done not through the European stability mechanism, wherein you basically give loans to the countries. It should actually be due to debt mutualization. That is, Europe should stand together, and Europe should basically try to finance this together. That was the argument which was being put forward specifically by Italy, Spain, and a set of Eurozone countries. As against this was the argument which was being put forward by the Frugal Four, that is, including Germany, Netherlands, and others, who basically were trying to say that, you should actually ask these countries to basically take a loan through the European stability mechanism, which again brings to the fore the issue of a lack of solidarity within Europe, a issue of a lack of issue of a question of asymmetry between the northern countries and the Euro periphery, issue of a set of conflicts between the bankers of Western Europe and the rest. Bankers of Western Europe, in the sense that, remember that, though of course it is said that these countries are responsible, technically these countries were inundated with a lot of capital flows because from European bankers were exposed much, particularly the German bankers. The extent of losses which they had sustained in the course of the 7 crises was almost like quarter of their GDP. That was a sort of loss which different German bankers had registered. So they had internationalized their bankers. The internationalized bankers of Europe, when they had to deleverage, unfortunately, the suffering had to be borne asymmetrically by the Europe periphery region. And even when such an unprecedented pandemic like the COVID pandemic occurs, we did not find much of a change. And have we risen up to the the promises of euro? This can be, you can basically see this chart also, that the relative share of euro area in the global economy, which was around 23%. In 1998, it has gone down to 15%. I'm saying this in terms of current dollar GDP. So at present, the euro share is around 15%, and the Chinese share, which is less than 5%, has risen up to say 17%. And the US share is reasonably intact, though of course it has declined from 30s. And remember that there was some sort of a convergence tendency. So you can see that the euro area GDP share and the US share was almost converging in the period of 2007. But ever since there's been a big divergence, and you basically have this happening. And there are economists like Yanis Varoufakis and others who have been arguing that certain economies outside the euro area, for example, the EU region economies like Bulgaria and Hungary and others, they stand more to benefit from the euro area rather than those countries who are tied up with the currency. And I hope that with this presentation, I've been able to shed some light on the sort of asymmetries which are showing up in a common currency area, which does not definitionally have all what is required. And remember that the current origins or the origins of the Bretton Woods system in 1950s was because it was told that the gold standard adjustment mechanism was price levels. That is, you had to reduce your wages to get some sort of an advantage. And in fact, the same place where all those battles of Chartist movement and others were held, which actually resulted in what is called a fixed peg sort of an exchange rate under the Bretton Woods. In the same place, we are now having a cross of euros for a set of countries. So if they have to generate a surplus, the only way out is that you have to reduce your wages and reduce your prices. And they are doing it. Europe is deflating. And when Europe is deflating, the rest of the world, they will have also to force themselves to go for reduction in the levels of prices. This means that the deflationary momentum in the global economy will further take new dimensions. There I rest my paper. Hello. Hello.
Dr. Krishnakumar, congratulations for extremely interesting and very insightful paper. I'm aware with the arguments of Varoufakis, and I read his book Global Minotaur, and where he argues that US is not playing the role of a leader by spending its money outside since it stopped doing that in the last 25 years, and it is gobbling up the global surpluses of all those countries like Japan and Germany and Middle Eastern countries, etc. I'm just probably we should have given you a little more time. Though I'm asking a clarificatory question.
Yeah. Yes.
That, so you are basically saying that under the current COVID crisis, which has totally depressed the industries across the countries, instead of they tried some monetary easing, but inflation has come back, so they are afraid now, and therefore, let me just complete, then you can. So they have tried some Keynesian solution, but it is fraught with a lot of inflationary consequences. And in the current global scenario arrangements, inflation can be very disastrous for foreign exchange markets and for stock markets and so on. So therefore, they don't want to try that route anymore, and they are trying to contract. If I please clarify if I
Yeah,
understood
yeah,
the paper well,
yeah.
and I did not understand whether you can again clarify me that what on countries like India and third world countries where inflation rates are much higher, and you're saying that we all also be forced to undergo deflationary policies, and this will be much more disastrous. Am I right broadly from your paper?
Yeah, I think almost, yeah, you also, in fact, you have got all the things which you have told, right? I think two, three clarifications from what you are speaking, Professor Subhash. I would say two things. One is, US has been gobbling surpluses of the rest of the world. Yes, right. Not only is US gobbling surpluses from the rest of the world, the net resource transfers to United States has been very high. Because if you take the income balances, the primary income balances of United States, it has been high. So we can say that the liabilities of United States in the rest of the world is higher than the assets. But the return which United States pays on the assets which it has in the rest of the world, the returns which it gets on the assets which it has in the rest of the world, like in China and India and the rest of the world where it invests, is far higher compared to the return which it has to pay on the liabilities because it is sitting over the treasury bills. And in fact, it is counting on the insecurity of different developing countries with respect to access to international liquidity that the treasury bill advantage is continually going to benefit United States. And coming to the second clarificatory question which you asked, that is relating to the question of countries in Europe are deflating, and the levels of inflation, that chart which I had shown was from the international financial statistics. The point which I'm trying to say is that all of these countries in Europe, particularly the countries in Europe periphery, their price levels have increased, say from 100 to 106 or 107, see from 2010 to 2020. Whereas ours have increased from 100 to 186, 197, which means that for a given exchange rate, the competitiveness of our goods is at a disadvantage. The logic which was being put forward by people like Dewey, Foucault's Landau, and Garber in their Bretton Woods 2 postulate was this, that different countries in East Asia, they are buying up treasuries, they are keeping their exchange rates at depreciated levels, and that's why they are able to sell and compete in the world. Now, Europe, which is a place which was witness to the mass market, wage, productivity driven growth in the 1950s to 70s, characterized in economic history as golden age of capitalism, is currently witnessing something dramatically different, where you're basically having a leader, Germany itself, through Hartz reform, refusing to go for wage increases in tandem with productivity improvements. And now the other countries, which have also got riddled with this crisis, are also getting out of it by going for lower and lower price levels. And if Europe is going to do this, and Europe periphery, and remember there are a set of countries outside Eurozone periphery, which is like the EU countries, like say Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, and others, they also have got strong linkages with the global value chain of Germany, centered around Germany. So logically speaking, we have a third alternative also possible, that you have the Euro periphery plus the Euro, EU, other than Euro countries also emerging to give up competitive pressures, put competitive pressures on different developing industrializing Asian countries. I think that also clarifies the second part. And the last part which sir was asking was about the process of inflation picking up, the process of the argument which people put forward that deficits have increased, monetary easing has increased, and as a result of that, inflation has increased, has been proven wrong. during the post-2010 period. The only time when inflation showed up was in the context of the recent crisis of Ukraine, wherein the oil prices went up. Till that time, it's so much of accommodative monetary easing. Remember the 10 to 20 period when we showed Europe was witness to so much of bond purchases, but the levels of prices have not changed, which means that unless we have supplementary fiscal push, which happens because nobody is ready to spend because of the air of uncertainty. That's exactly why democracy in Europe movement by Yanis Varoufakis and others are essentially trying to put forward an argument that through collective debt mutualization borrowings in the market, Europe should basically try to come out strong from this crisis.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Subhash.
He's not a professor as yet. He's a research scholar helping us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnakumar. I have one clarification from your slide. If you show us the slide, like consumer price, one slide is there.
Yeah, I can show you that slide. Yeah.
For many countries in a particular year, maybe 2004 or something.
2000, I'm just showing you. It starts actually, the problem is that it starts from 2010 is equal to 100 index. That's why you are thinking that many countries it's the same.
Yeah. That is what
I'm just showing you that chart. Once, am I showing the screen?
Before that one.
I will just show you the screen. Wait 1 second.
Yes, that one.
This one. Yeah, I'm just showing you the this one. Yeah.
So
the IFS is reporting this with 2010 as base.
Okay.
All the countries will be, if the country's inflation level is say 100, which means that you have this India getting 186, which means that there has been 86% inflation in the course of 10 years. In fact, it is also just 8%. It's not a very high level of inflation, okay? But here are countries like, say, our friends in Greece and Portugal and all. Some of them are even witness to reduction in the level. That is, they have gone from 100 levels to even say 99 so on. So this is say Greece, and you have just above Greece, if I could clarify, it is Ireland, and just above that it is Italy, and along with it is Spain. And above, then you can see a set of countries which I have brought your attention to is China, Malaysia, and Korea. You would wonder why I put China, Malaysia, and Korea, because these are our East Asian industrializing countries. And their rates of inflation also during this particular period has been far lower compared to these countries there. So that is the sort of issue which I was drawing attention to. And I think the doubt which you had was with respect to this 100 is equal to 2000.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other question? Okay. There is no question. Thank you very much for a very delightful paper and interesting on global picture. Professor Ramanamurthy has another question.
Yes.
Professor Krishnakumar, if you have completed your papers, send the full version. We might come out with a special volume on political economy, and we'll be very happy to publish it.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, Professor Ramanamurthy, for allowing me to come online and present this at the Indian Political Economy Association, because I was hard pressed for different work here. Thank you so much for that, sir.
Thank you.
Thank